Well, I think it was a family show, and of course, we had subject matter that everyone could relate to, so that's always good. And of course,
Danielle Spencer, best known as Kid Sister D from What's Happening, has died. She was 60 years old.
They said it was random. It's a tragic ending. The kind of story you read once and forget. But what if it wasn't random at all? What if this ending was aimed sharp, deliberate, and far more unsettling than the headlines dared to admit? Danielle Spencer is gone. Yet the silence she left behind is louder than any applause she ever received. And with her passing comes a message. A final message. A message Hollywood doesn't want you to hear. Tonight, on the Shafkat channel, we're peeling back the curtain on one of the most overlooked tragedies of the entertainment world. A story about truth, silence, and the dangers of speaking when the wrong people are holding the pen. The official story is clean, neat, easy to digest. On August 11th, 2024, Danielle Spencer Child, star of the hit 1970s sitcom What's Happening, died in Chesapeake, Virginia. The death certificate was clinical, gastric cancer. Complications of cardiac arrest? She was 60 years old. That's where most outlets left it. A few paragraphs of nostalgia, a handful of still photos from her sitcom days. Beloved star gone too soon. But whispers quickly spread among those who knew her, those who had followed her online, those who had listened closely to her words in the final days. Because Danielle Spencer didn't just vanish into silence. Hours before her death, she had spoken. Their final words weren't vague. They weren't sentimental. They weren't the polite thank yous we've come to expect from celebrity farewells. No. Danielle's final post was sharp. A warning. A dagger hidden inside a farewell. She spoke of unfinished conversations. She spoke of truth being twisted. She spoke of the wrong people holding the pen. She didn't name names. She didn't need to. The words were enough to make people stop scrolling. It's enough to make people whisper. What was Danielle trying to tell us? To understand why her final message stings so much, you need to remember where she started. Danielle Spencer was born on June 24th, 1965. For most kids, that's a date lost in history. But for Danielle, it was the beginning of a strange kind of destiny. By the mid-1970s, she was cast in a sitcom that would change everything. What's Happening? The show was bright, colorful, and hilarious. Inspired by the 1975 film Cooley High, it followed three teenage friends navigating life in Los Angeles. But Danielle wasn't one of the main boys. She was the sister, Dee Thomas. And Dee was unforgettable. Sharp tongue, rolling eyes, brutal sarcasm. She was the kind of little sister who cut through every conversation with the kind of wit that only a child can get away with. Audiences adored her. Critics noted how naturally she delivered her lines, how her deadpan timing was beyond her years. She was the scene stealer, the unexpected star. Yet for 65 episodes of What's Happening, and another 16 episodes of the sequel, What's Happening Now? Danielle Spencer gave the world a performance that still echoes today. But while we laughed at Dee's sass and smiled at her comebacks, something else was happening behind the scenes. Something darker. Because Hollywood has never been kind to its child stars. And in 1977, Danielle's story took a turn so devastating that it would rewrite the rest of her life. It was September 1977. Danielle was just 12 years old, living the kind of life most kids only dream about. Sitcom fame, recognition, a bright future. And then everything stopped. On that day, Danielle was in a car with her stepfather and manager, Tim Pelt. A man who wasn't just guiding her career, he was guiding her life. They were driving when tragedy struck. The crash was brutal, deadly. Tim Pelt was killed instantly. Danielle was left fighting for her life. She was rushed to the hospital, broken and unconscious. She slipped into a coma. For weeks, her survival was uncertain. Doctors didn't know if she'd ever wake up, and if she did, whether she'd ever walk again. Imagine this. One day you're on top of the world. A child star adored by millions. The next, you're a patient in a hospital bed, fighting to simply open your eyes. For Danielle, the crash wasn't just an accident, it was an erasure. Because Hollywood doesn't wait. Hollywood doesn't pause. Hollywood doesn't forgive interruptions. While she was fighting for her life, the industry moved on. The cameras rolled. The sitcom world she had helped build kept turning without her. And by the time she recovered, Danielle Spencer was no longer the bright young star with a future ahead of her. She was a child actress Hollywood had quietly left behind. After the crash, Danielle's world never looked the same again. She was still Dee Thomas in the eyes of fans, forever frozen as that sarcastic little sister. But in the eyes of Hollywood executives, she was something else. A risk. The sitcom ended. The roles dried up. The doors closed. This wasn't new. Hollywood has a long history of discarding black child stars once they're no longer useful. And for Danielle, the crash gave the industry a convenient excuse to push her aside. No comeback campaign, no high-profile auditions, no roles written to bring her back. It was as though she had never existed. And yet Danielle Spencer was not the kind of woman to stay silent. By the late 1980s, while most forgotten child stars descended into scandal or disappeared entirely, Danielle did something extraordinary. She reinvented herself. She walked away from Hollywood, earning a doctorate in veterinary medicine. She built a new life, a different identity. But here's the part Hollywood couldn't predict. Even as she stepped into a new world, she carried the scars of her old one. The crash, the surgeries, the silence, the way the industry had erased her. And in her final days, decades later, she chose to speak, to write, to post one last time. A message so sharp, so unfinished, so haunting, that it feels less like a goodbye and more like a warning. What was Danielle Spencer really trying to tell us in her last words? When a Hollywood star falls, the lights usually go dark forever. The cameras move on. The audience forgets. But Danielle Spencer refused to vanish. After the 1977 crash that stole her stepfather's life and nearly ended her own, Hollywood quietly closed its doors on her. To the industry, Danielle Spencer was damaged goods. To the world, she was frozen in time, the sarcastic little sister, Dee Thomas, forever stuck in reruns. But here's the twist Hollywood didn't expect. Danielle didn't just survive, she reinvented herself. She rewrote her own script. She became more than what they allowed her to be. And yet, just when it seemed she had outrun the shadow of her past, betrayal, illness, and silence came roaring back. Her final words, they weren't just about her life. They were about a pattern. A truth Hollywood has spent decades trying to erase. After the crash, Danielle eventually returned to what's happening now, the 1985 sequel to her original show. She was older, wiser, but still had the same sharp wit that made audiences love her. But the magic didn't last. The show fizzled. Hollywood moved on, and Danielle, still carrying the physical and emotional scars of her crash, found herself in a familiar place, erased.
Erased.
This wasn't unique. Hollywood has a cruel history of discarding black actresses once they're no longer convenient. Danielle's story mirrored others' child stars whose talents were undeniable, but whose opportunities were cut short the moment tragedy struck. And yet, where others drowned in obscurity, Danielle did something extraordinary. Danielle didn't chase the spotlight. She didn't cling to the fading glow of Hollywood. Instead, she made a bold choice one few stars ever dare to make. She enrolled at Tuskegee University, one of the most prestigious historically black colleges in America. There she studied veterinary medicine, a field worlds away from scripts and sitcoms. She didn't just dabble, she excelled. Danielle Spencer became Dr. Danielle Spencer, a practicing veterinarian in Virginia. To her patients and their owners, she wasn't Dee from What's Happening. She was the doctor who saved lives. The woman who stitched wounds, healed injuries, and comforted families. For most, that would be enough. Fame as a child star. Second career as a doctor. 2 lives lived in one lifetime. But fate wasn't finished with Danielle. The crash that nearly ended her life in 1977 never really left her, haunted her body like a ghost. Years later, Danielle began suffering severe spinal issues. By 2004, the pain had become unbearable. She underwent major surgery to relieve pressure on her spinal cord, a surgery so risky. Doctors warned it could paralyze her permanently. She survived. But her health battles didn't stop there. In 2014, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. She fought, endured treatment, and emerged victorious, cancer-free. But barely 4 years later, tragedy struck again. In 2018, Danielle faced another surgery, this time for bleeding on her brain. Recovery was grueling. Think about it. 3 near-death experiences. A crash, cancer, brain surgery, and through it all, Danielle Spencer kept standing, kept fighting, kept speaking. For decades, Hollywood ignored her, pretended she wasn't part of its history. But in 2014, something remarkable happened. The Smithsonian Institution honored Danielle Spencer for her contributions to television history. The same Danielle who had been discarded was now celebrated as one of the first African-American child stars to lead a primetime sitcom. It was recognition. It was respect. But it came decades too late. Because by then, Danielle had already endured more pain, more silence, and more betrayal than most of Hollywood's biggest stars combined. And in the years leading to her death, she began dropping hints, comments, warnings, and then finally her final message. Danielle's last post wasn't sentimental. It wasn't safe. It wasn't sweet. She didn't thank fans. She didn't reminisce. She didn't talk about sitcoms or fame or nostalgia. Instead, she spoke of unfinished conversations. She spoke of truth being twisted. She spoke of the wrong people holding the pen. What did she mean? Some believe Danielle was talking about her life story, the way Hollywood had erased her, rewritten. Her turned her into a footnote instead of a headline. Others whisper it was bigger than that. Her words weren't just about her, but about a cycle. A machine that consumes black talent, wrings it dry, and discards it once it's no longer profitable. And then there's the darkest theory, that Danielle's warning wasn't just about the past. It was about something still happening, something she saw, something she couldn't fully say out loud. Her words felt less like a farewell, and more like a dare. A challenge to the industry that had erased her, a challenge to us to look closer. To not accept the official story, Danielle Spencer wasn't the first, and she wasn't the last. From Judy Garland to Gary Coleman, from Brittany Murphy to countless others, Hollywood has a pattern, a cycle. It loves its stars when they're shiny and new. But once they're broken, once they're complicated, once they dare to speak truth, the machine turns away, the lights go dark, the erasure begins. And for black actresses, especially child stars, that cycle is even harsher. Danielle Spencer lived that erasure. She felt it. She carried it in her body, her career, her silence. And in her final words, she tried to expose it. Danielle Spencer's life was a battle between erasure and reinvention. Between silence and truth, she was erased by Hollywood. She reinvented. Herself as a doctor, she endured crash, cancer, and brain surgery. And just when it seemed she had survived everything, she left us with words that still echo like thunder. Unfinished conversations. The wrong people holding the pen. What was Danielle trying to warn us about? What unfinished story was she pointing to? Why even in death does it feel like her message wasn't about her at all, but about sometimes... The most important truths aren't whispered, they're shouted in silence. A final breath, a final whisper, a final warning. Danielle Spencer's journey ended quietly, but her words, they still thunder. She wasn't just another forgotten child star. She wasn't just Dee from What's Happening. She wasn't just a doctor, a survivor, or a victim of fate. Danielle Spencer was a mirror. And in her reflection, we see not just her story, but a pattern. A cycle Hollywood doesn't want us to notice. The tributes poured in, so grief was real. But hidden inside those tears was something else. The key to what Danielle meant when she wrote, unfinished conversations, the wrong people holding the pen, the legacy, the challenge, the message. In her last days, Danielle was surrounded by family. The battle had been long decades of pain, surgeries, treatments. Her body had endured more than most armies. Her brother remembers her final moments vividly, She was fragile, but still fierce. Even as the light faded, there was a spark in her eyes, as if she knew something, as if she had one last secret she couldn't quite say out loud. And then, just before she left, her final post appeared. No names, no direct accusations, no clear goodbye, just one last coded message. Unfinished conversations. Wrong people holding the pen. What was she pointing to? Regrets? Betrayals? Hollywood itself. Or something we may never fully understand. Her breath may have ended, but her warning that stayed. When the news broke, tributes came flooding in. Fans who grew up watching what's happening shared how Danielle's sarcastic wit shaped their childhoods. Former co-stars described her as warm, sharp, and funny, exactly like the character America fell in love with. Her brother said she left this world with courage. Her colleagues in veterinary medicine remembered her not as a star, but as a healer. Even Hollywood, the same industry that once erased her, posted hollow condolences, tweets, statements, the kind of empty recognition that feels too little too late. But Danielle Spencer wasn't asking for sympathy, not in life, not in death. What she wanted, what she dared to demand, was accountability. Danielle Spencer didn't wait for Hollywood to define her legacy. She built her own. As a child actress, she was part of history, one of the first black girls to star in a primetime sitcom. Her presence on screen mattered. She showed millions of kids that they, too, deserved to be seen. As a doctor, she saved lives. She stitched wounds. She gave comfort. She gave families more time with the pets they loved. And as a survivor, she defied the odds again and again. Crash, surgery, cancer, brain bleed. Danielle Spencer kept rising, even when the world expected her to fall. Her legacy isn't fame, isn't money, it isn't headlines. Her legacy is resilience, but her final message, that was something else, something more dangerous. Something Hollywood never wanted her to say, because Danielle Spencer's story isn't just Danielle's story. Hollywood is filled with echoes, just like hers. Stars whose lives are twisted into narratives they never approved. Stories written by people who profit from pain. Think of Gary Coleman, child star turned tabloid headline. Think of Brittany Murphy, dead at 32, her legacy wrapped in rumors. Think of Judy Garland, exploited until she broke. Each story different. But the pattern. The machine builds them up. The machine breaks them down. And when they're gone, the machine rewrites them. Danielle Spencer saw that pattern. She lived it. In her last words, she tried to name it. Unfinished conversations. Wrong people. Holding the pen. Maybe Danielle wasn't just reflecting on her own life. Maybe she was daring us to stop letting Hollywood control the narrative. Maybe her final words weren't a goodbye at all, but a challenge. A reminder that too many stories end the same way. Stars erased, truth silenced, the wrong people writing the ending. Danielle Spencer wanted her story told on her terms. Not Hollywood's, not the tabloids, not the exploiters. And maybe, just maybe, her final post was her way of passing the pen. To us, Danielle Spencer was more than Dee, more than a doctor, more than a survivor. She was a warning, a mirror, a message. Her final words still echo like thunder. Unfinished conversations. Wrong people holding the pen. So the question is, who will finish those conversations? Who will hold the pen now? Because Danielle Spencer's story didn't end when her heart stopped. It ends when we decide it ends. And maybe, just maybe, that's what she wanted all along. This has been the untold story of Danielle Spencer. A child star erased, a doctor reborn, a survivor betrayed, and a woman who left us with a warning. Hollywood may want you to remember her as Dee, but here, on this channel, we remember her as something more. I'm Shafkat Khan, and this was Danielle Spencer's story, unfiltered, untold, and unforgettable. Stay with me, because the lights may fade, but the truth will always find its way out.